for the love of God, the Republican Party in Washington state, it is like death by 1,000 cuts of their own making. The party is irreparably broken, in my opinion. You saw that this cycle with the whole Semi-Bird Dave Reichert thing, the party endorsing a lot of candidates who just didn't have a chance or weren't the kind of Republicans who can win in Washington state. And I get it. Like, there's a big segment of the Republican Party that's tired of compromising on their principles and like tired of watering down their views to placate Seattle liberals. I understand how that's frustrating, but you also have to play a game of, do you want to win or not, right? Do you want to win or not? You can stand by your principles and be hard and fast to your conservatism and not budge an inch, but you'll lose, and that's fine if that's the path that you decide. Or you have to understand we're in a blue state and you have to make little bits of progress if you want to make a difference on anything. So that's, I think, where I just have a fundamental disagreement with the approach of a lot of Republicans in Washington state. So Jerrod Sessler is a perfect example of this. So the state Republican Party endorsed Jerrod Sessler, a businessman, for Congress in the 4th District. So that's the seat currently held by Dan Newhouse. And remember, Tiffany Smiley also jumped in, but she didn't make it past the primary. So you've got Jerrod Sessler, who's the Trump-endorsed Republican, endorsed by the state party. And then Dan Newhouse, who's been in that seat for some time, but he had the cardinal sin of voting to impeach former President Donald Trump. So there's a big segment of the Republican base that doesn't want him there. And I don't know if it's a big segment, but there's certainly a sizable segment of the Republican base who just will not forgive him for that. And so they keep trying to get him out of office with these further to the right Trump-aligned Republicans. Well, for the love of God, look, let me just say this, because Jerrod Sessler, I was up till 1:30 a.m. working on a blockbuster story that shall remain secret. And I saw this article, which I'm going to get to in a moment, and I was just going wild on Twitter because this stuff drives me nuts. Like, you wonder why you can't win, and then you've got people who say dumb shit like this. Like, Jerrod Sessler's always been perfectly nice to me, but he's very fringe, and he says stuff he shouldn't say. And I kind of regret, because I responded to I'm just going to say this. I shouldn't have said it, but somebody responded like, oh, you're just now realizing he's a moron. And I said, well, I kind of always knew, but that's why I supported Dan Newhouse's campaign. I don't think I should take that back. I don't think Jerrod Sessler is a moron per se. I mean, that's not the kind of language I usually use, so I probably shouldn't have responded to that in that way. But when you say stuff like this, it's kind of hard for me to feel differently. So Jerrod Sessler came out in an interview in the Yakima Herald and says he doesn't believe that devout Muslim Americans should be in Congress. In fact, he had so much to say on this topic that they made it a complete breakout section from this entire article, which it's titled, How Dan Newhouse and Jerrod Sessler Would Lead in D.C. And it gets into all these issues, but, I mean, they were probably really taken aback by what Jerrod Sessler had to say about Muslim Americans, that they did this whole break-off article off to the side about it. I'm just going to read this whole section to you. It says, Sessler on Muslim Americans. In an interview, Sessler touched on his views on Muslim Americans in Congress. He said he would work with Muslim representatives, although he did not agree with their religious views. There are at least 3 Muslims serving in Congress: Andre Carlson of Indiana, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, and Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. Sessler emphasized that Muslims are welcome in the United States. Gee, thanks. And he supports Muslim Americans ascending to leadership positions in society. But Sessler said he did not feel that Muslim Americans should be in Congress. Quote, there is no way that a devout Muslim should be in Congress because they can't take the oath of office, Sessler said. Their fundamental belief system is anti-American. What if the majority of Congress was Muslim? How safe and secure would our Constitution be? It wouldn't be, Sessler added. And then the Yakima Herald goes on to add some information. They said the Constitution's First Amendment protects the freedom of religion and gives people the right to practice their religion freely. Asked to clarify his statement, he noted passages from the Quran call for killing non-Muslims. Those words can be misinterpreted and often taken out of context, according to a 2014 Seattle Times column from Aziz Huno, a writer and TV show host. Killing is mentioned, but in very specific circumstances around peace and self-defense. Sessler said that despite his views, he would be respectful and speak with Muslim representatives in Congress. Quote, I would still treat a Muslim representative with dignity because there might be something I need. God. Omar and Tlaib have served in Congress since 2018, and Carlson has served since 2008. That's unhinged. That's a I don't think Jerrod Sessler is a moron. I think that's a moronic statement and a moronic worldview from someone who claims to be a constitutional conservative. And that's where I fall on this. I was surprised. I sent out, no, I wasn't surprised. I sent out a post on X last night and said, this is awful. It is disqualifying and it is unconstitutional. It's an affront to our First Amendment. And that's how I really feel. But he calls himself like a constitutional conservative. I'm sorry, but this is blatantly anti-constitutional. There were a lot of people on X coming to his defense, like, yeah, Muslim, devout Muslims like believe in Sharia law and all these things that are totally fly in the face of American values. Look, you can believe that, but at the end of the day, the First Amendment still exists. At the end of the day, we allow, a lot of illegal immigration, but a lot of lawful immigration of people from all over the world into our country. That was sort of the promise of our country, right? Bring us your poor, your tired, your huddled masses yearning to be free. And so America isn't a place that turns away citizens of the world who come here seeking a better life. Some of them we should turn away when they come illegally. But you're talking about the people who are coming to his defense upending what our founding fathers put in place. Upending, the First Amendment to the Constitution, which allows people the freedom of religion and the freedom to practice that religion openly. And it's also a gross mischaracterization and generalization of Muslim Americans. I know many Muslim Americans. I have read the Quran because about 7 or 8 years ago, I was provided a English version. I studied Arabic for a little while, but when I was doing that, someone who knew I was studying Arabic gave me an Arabic English version of the Quran. And one of the things I said on X, because he talks about, the Quran, there's a lot of things in the Bible that aren't meant to be taken literally. People can manipulate really any religion to make it to back their extremist agenda. That's like saying that every Christian is a Christian white nationalist who wants like pure-blooded white blue-eyed Americans. That's just a stupid thing to say. To paint all Muslims as extremists who like want to put Sharia law on the American people and are like, it's just a dumb thing to say. It really is. And look, I think we can have a conversation, and I don't think we've shied away from this conversation about, what the flood of immigrants does to the country and all these like conflicting values, conflicting beliefs, conflicting behavior. When you have people who are coming here from third world countries, the Haitian migrants thing that people say they're eating cats and dogs, which I don't know if we've ever settled whether they were eating cats and dogs. There seems to be some evidence that it happened a couple times, but whatever. You still have people who come in from a totally different world, totally different day to day, and then try to fit in with American life and American values in a way that sometimes can come into conflict. I think that's a perfectly healthy conversation to have. Some people might say that that's like, bigoted. No, I don't think so. I think we should talk about that, right? Because it can, change the fabric of the country. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, but we have to figure out, can we live together? Can we coexist together? Can we be that like shining beacon, for people around the world who are yearning to be free? But to just say like flat out that Muslim Americans who are devout can't be members of Congress is just anti-constitutional. It's anti-American, frankly. And that's what I would ask people who were defending Jerrod Sessler is like, because you should read my X replies. A lot of people saying like, here's why he said that, and blah, blah, blah. But I would ask, how would that work in principle? Like in practice, rather. How would that work in practice? Who gets to decide whether a Muslim is too devout to run for Congress? Like, is the government going to decide? Do you get to decide, Jerrod? Who gets to decide that? Like, what addition to the First Amendment are you going to put in there? Like, you have the right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, unless you're too devout of a Muslim? Like, how in practice do you want to implement that? You see what I'm saying? And then, these are the same people who are like diehard Second Amendment supporters. And you've got like, think of it that way, right? So you've got the left that says, yeah, well, the Second Amendment was never written for weapons of war, high capacity magazines and assault weapons in the hands of civilians. And so that's why they tried to erode the Second Amendment. Well, you're doing the same thing with the First Amendment. Well, the First Amendment was never written for devout Muslims and the Muslims that we're experiencing today who are in the United States. So you're just doing the same thing on a different side of the coin, and you think it's righteous. I just see it as erosion of our constitutional protections and an erosion of what our founding fathers established for this country. So look, it's the right of the voters. It's the right of a democracy to decide whether they want a devout Muslim in Congress. It's not Jerrod Sessler's job job to determine whether too devout of a Muslim would be dangerous for Congress and dangerous for our American institutions. I think it's hateful. I do think it's bigoted. You know, I don't label things that very easily. And I think it makes the Washington State Republican Party look ridiculous because this is someone they've endorsed.